There's one thing about Amazon's private label that I find extremely interesting, which is their policy for warranty repair is like they just want to send you a new one. I actually think there's something really wrong with that in the context of sustainability. I get the idea of convenience, but that means you could have the same person that's treating a piece of luggage like a consumable, and that's really damaging.
This is the E-commerce Brain Trust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Brain Trust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Hello and welcome back to the E-commerce Brain Trust podcast. I'm your host, Kiri Masters, and today I had the pleasure of introducing Charlie Cole, the Global Chief E-commerce Officer at Samsonite. As part of the acquisition of Tumi by Samsonite, Charlie became the first Chief E-commerce Officer at Samsonite, while also maintaining his role as Chief Digital Officer at Tumi. Leading the e-commerce channel for luxury luggage brands like Samsonite and Tumi and the various other brands under the Samsonite umbrella certainly presents its own challenges and opportunities in our new Amazon environment. So I was thrilled to be able to get Charlie on the mic to talk about how his decision-making framework works around e-commerce and Amazon in particular. I also wanted to mention that Charlie is one of the retail executives that I interviewed for my upcoming book, Amazon for CMOs, which comes out in September. This book is part handbook about the Amazon opportunity and part voice of industry from real retail executives like Charlie. If you're a CMO or someone who works closely with CMOs, you're likely exposed to a sea of information about Amazon, and it can be very overwhelming at times to figure out a decent playbook for your brand and figure out how to adjust course if necessary. In Amazon for CMOs, my co-author Mark Power and myself dissect Amazon's leadership principles and decision-making frameworks to guide you in making your own decisions with this increasingly important channel. For the first few days after launch, the Kindle version of the book will be free. So sign up to get your free copy at launch, and we'll also have a discount on the paperback and Audible versions of the book as well. So go to amazonforcmos.com to sign up for our email list there to be notified of the launch. Or if you're already on the Bobsled marketing email list, you'll also hear about it there as well. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Charlie Cole. Well, welcome back to the E-commerce Brain Trust podcast. I'm your host, Kiri Masters, and today I'm really thrilled to be joined by a special guest, Charlie Cole, who is the Chief Global E-commerce Officer at Tumi. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be on.
The reason why I stumbled over your title is because you have two official titles, as far as I can tell. The Global Chief E-commerce Officer at Samsonite and the Chief Digital Officer at Tumi. And those both sound like big, complicated jobs. So how is that working?
Well, it's sort of a testament to kind of how I came to the Samsonite Corporation, which was by way of the Tumi acquisition. And so the structures, as they started to meld together, Tumi at the time was extremely centralized at a global perspective out of our US office. And Samsonite was honestly quite the opposite, extremely decentralized. And so as we all started to get to know each other, I transitioned to sort of this global e-commerce officer role of the Samsonite Corporation. But I still kind of maintain a day-to-day relationship with the Tumi team as well. But if I was being honest, I could probably lose the Tumi title at this point. It's just more kind of a testament to sort of my roots within the organization, if you would.
Gotcha. Okay. And so is your remit purely focused on the Samsonite brand within Tumi?
No, it's a great question. A lot of people don't realize that Samsonite as a company is a lot of brands. We own brands like Samsonite, Tumi, ebags.com, Spec, High Sierra, Hartman, Leupold, amongst others. And my remit is actually over the entire portfolio. So really my focus is digital growth, both direct owned channels, meaning Samsonite.com or tumi.co.gp, as well as indirect channels such as Amazon, Alibaba, et cetera. And so, yeah, the remit really is entirely portfolio wide and worldwide as well.
Very interesting. So I'd love to hear a bit more about your career background, because you've been in e-commerce for a really long time, in e-commerce dog years, over 10 years, which is almost a whole lifetime. You've been in e-commerce at Reckitt Benckiser, Lucky Brand. You have advised e-commerce companies over the years as well. So tell us a bit about your career arc.
One of the things I always like to say is that if you were to strip off sort of all the layers of career path and management experience, et cetera, and just distill down my abilities to, if I was to have an entry-level job today, I really came into e-commerce by way of analysis. I love numbers. I think that data centricity is imperative to any sort of digital or e-commerce success. So I was very lucky coming out of university to be at that sort of natural pathway where I don't think a lot of people that were coming out of college with degrees in statistics or physics or economics or whatever were necessarily considering a path to digital. It wasn't quite as implied as it is now, but I just kind of got lucky. I fell into a .com startup that was generating real estate leads. And at the time, they were generating them predominantly with local radio. And I was analyzing the media and I sort of said, hey, everybody, this Google AdWords thing is way better at what we're trying to accomplish. And the rest was sort of history. So I suppose kind of the digital marketing / statistics background has really been kind of my core. And as I've been in e-commerce leadership roles and digital leadership roles and throughout my career, I've kind of learned where to appreciate the other aspects of e-commerce that are really necessary to succeed, such as creativity and merchandising and customer service. So I think what makes me fairly unique is my mix of big company, like you referenced being acquired by Reckitt, now at Tumi and Samsonite, working under the Liz Claiborne banner when I was at Lucky Brand, but also, true startups. I was the CEO of a company called The Line and helped build the fashion group for an investment group called Assembled Brands. So that sort of mix of entrepreneurship and more big company experience is something that I'm extremely grateful for. But if I'm being honest, it wasn't something I sought after. It just kind of happened all very naturally. But digital and kind of data centricity has been sort of the fabric that held my entire career together.
That's interesting, because I think a lot of people come into e-commerce from the merchant background.
Yeah. And I think that it's a very natural thing, right? Is that like, how do you position things to be sold? That's a ubiquitous question, right? It's a ubiquitous question regardless of if you're a mono-brand retailer, a wholesaler on Amazon, or a .com kind of on-site usability expert. It wasn't really how I came about it. And then if I was being really honest, early on in my career, it's probably an art I didn't appreciate as much as I should have. I was more just kind of retroactive analysis and reacting and not really appreciating the artistry that kind of goes into that role when you're talking about a purely generative nature. So I think merchandising is a great skill to have. And for me, surrounding myself with kind of complementary pieces and people, that's someone I'm always really looking for. To me, it was this woman named Teresa who was just an absolute godsend for our team because honestly, it's not my strength. Right. So being able to surround yourself with someone who's really naturally good at that to complement your weaknesses, I think is imperative on any good team, e-commerce or otherwise.
Yeah, that headline is really nice, but where are the ones and zeros?
Yeah, right. I mean, and I think for me, I'm so ones and zeros motivated that I always have to make sure I'm not being overly analytical, because in a premium business in particular, creativity is really important. And more important, things that are a little bit more soft, like brand positioning and lifestyle branding and all this sort of stuff. I don't think analysts or analytically biased people are usually very quick to give those things much merit. And that's kind of where I've had to evolve my thinking a little bit. And look, if you can kind of make a culture that is very, very supportive of generative creative, but then complemented with just ruthless, pragmatic analysis, I think that's the best mix of a business you can possibly have.
That is really the ideal. The ruthless, what did you say? The ruthless pragmatism.
Yeah, I actually stole that line from the show House of Cards, and I've reused it for a long time, which I suppose, honestly, that show hasn't aged quite well for various reasons. But ultimately, I've always appreciated the idea of ruthless pragmatism as it pertains to analyzing things. Like if you're going to be one of those people who's just like, well, I know the numbers say that, but really, we still did good. And it's just like, well, we're going to let the numbers decide what really happened. I get a kick out of particular when brand marketers run a campaign and they're like, oh, it was shown to this many people and it had this many impressions and this much total eyeballs and the total media value was X. And then you're like, but sales were down? Like it's just like ultimately how you evaluate things. I think we all have to evolve to a modern day world where honestly, virtually anything can be measured and held accountable. And if you're not willing to do that, I don't think you're long for this world as a marketer.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I really want to come back to where that tension between brand and finance and operations and customer service and product, like where all that fits in the new sort of e-commerce function, because that tension is really being seen in a lot of companies as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think that brand is, specifically if you're at like a really big agency and you're buying brand media, you have to appreciate the fact that it's in your best interest to maintain the status quo, right? You don't necessarily want to have this next level of accountability of analytics that digital really, frankly, guarantees. In a lot of ways, it's expanded to brick and mortar accountability as well, as you talk about beacons and what having a phone in the pocket of every single one of your consumers means for what you can track and not track. I think that there's something to be said for sort of fighting against that status quo within your organization and taking the initiative to hold brand media to a higher level than it ever has before. If you have people that have an unwillingness to do that, that sort of raises my hackles a little bit. It makes my spidey sense tingle that there's something deeper going on, because I think we should all sort of strive for accountability, particularly in the digital medium.
That's a great position to take. And I do agree with you, especially with the new media platforms that we have available. They're all data driven. I mean, you think about Amazon and their media business that is rising up. You can bet that they are measuring every single data point that they can. Whether they share all of that externally with advertisers is another question, but it's all extremely data driven.
Yeah, I think that mention and that analogy is a perfect example of sort of Amazon, to your point. I guarantee internally everything is measured and everything is optimized to drive their profitability. But if you think about what's provided to folks like us, ACOS, like what is that? What is that purely from an incremental perspective? So they're also doing their best to kind of manage with a certain matter of opaqueness, which I think is, to your point, in their best interest, but not necessarily in the best interest of an e-commerce executive.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, because ACOS is basically a different calculation for ROAS, but it's just Amazon wanted to have their own definition of it. And it kind of goes to this concept of walled gardens that Amazon's creating, Walmart's creating. They've got their own media division now. And then I saw in the news today, Target has a new media division that they're also doing, running programmatic campaigns for brands as well. So this is great because it's going to drive costs down of bids and CPCs and impressions, because there's going to be more inventory. There's going to be more places to advertise. But on the flip side, these are all walled gardens, and they have, each of those players, and we could include Facebook and Google in there as well, have zero interest in sharing any data or helping brands to connect the dots between channels. So although you've got more channels to advertise on, competitive rates, because there's more inventory, ideally. But then how do you even, to your point about incrementality, how do I know that the same customer that I targeted through Amazon DSP is a different customer to the one that I use Target's new media planning team for?
You're referencing sort of one of our biggest challenges, which is the desire to help consumers and target consumers when and where they're shopping, and at the same time not be overly distributed. And I'd say specifically with the Tumi brand, this is a real interesting kind of challenge. And I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer, because you could make an argument if you were thinking, look, you want to make the most money possible, you should be distributed anywhere. Okay, fine. Like, I think that from, again, a pragmatic point of view, that's a hard thing to argue. But then you jump into these more kind of squishy ideas, such as, what does that do to your brand identity? Does that change your consumer's perception of what Tumi is as a premium brand? Those questions are, by definition, a little wishy-washy, right? They're hard to kind of point a finger on it and say, if we distribute in Target, it would hurt our brand over the next 3 years. I couldn't look you in the eye and definitively tell you that, but I also don't think that's an unbelievable statement, right? There is such thing as this brand perception. And I think, honestly, that's what I was referring to as a good team needs to have this balance of the aforementioned analytical pragmatism, but complemented with these folks that are thinking about the brand as a little bit more of a living being, right? It's going to evolve, and you have to be very careful with where you put it. And I think that's, to your point, as more media channels become available, distributing becomes that much more powerful, because now you're not just selling things to more points of contact. You also have, to your point, more media options. And so it makes that sort of distribution strategy that much more meaningful and that much more potentially impactful.
Yes. And at the same time, more complex. And I'd love to switch gears to talk about Tumi and the Samsonite brands often occupying that premium place in the market. With Amazon and the way that commerce has shifted over the last 10 years, there's now a lot of challenger brands out there, and they're generally lower priced, maybe leaner on features, leaner on brand. So I imagine that this is one challenge that you face, particularly on marketplaces, is defending your brand position.
Yeah. And you start to get to this ultimate question, which is, why should a consumer buy your brand? And this is not a unique challenge to a Tumi or Samsonite. This is really, honestly, what every brand on earth should be asking itself. And for us, I think there's two things that we always have to make sure we tell the story of. Number one, sometimes heritage can be perceived as a disadvantage in a lot of ways, right? Because if you've been around for a long time, you can also start to use synonyms like old, right? I mean, that's not necessarily a positive expectation of a brand. But in our case, we make a really complicated thing, something that is going to be thrown into the bottom of a plane and come out of a conveyor belt and hit an aluminum conveyor belt. And I mean, durability is sacrosanct to our business. And the fact is, our long-term kind of presence in this market honestly gives us an opportunity to engineer something better than everybody else on earth. Now, to your point, marketplace world, that's a hard story to tell. So then the next thing is, this is something I'm actually really proud of the work we're doing, and I'll be the first to admit we still have a ways to go. I think another place that we can differentiate ourselves is after the sale, right? And this kind of concept of after sales service. The more we can provide value to you after you bought something, if you think about the marketplaces like Amazon, what are they really good at? They're really good at optimizing the website to sell stuff. I think we all admit, they actually make the 30-day return policy pretty fantastic, right? It's pretty easy to return stuff. They're fairly liberal with allowing returns. But then what, right? Like they're not in the warranty and repair world. They're not in the kind of lifetime value of a brand world. They're not in like value adds via loyalty programs. One could argue that Prime is a loyalty program, but that's really a transactional loyalty. You don't get added benefits beyond that. And so I think asking ourselves how to drive a consumer relationship after the sale is one place that we, as well as every brand, every kind of branded manufacturer, should be talking about it. And I think we're getting pretty darn good at it. It's a place that honestly we can win, because to your point, these commoditized brands generally don't want to worry about that stuff. They really are kind of in that business.
Yeah, absolutely. And one comment that I've been making on this podcast a lot recently is that the very first brands of the world were literally seared on the back of cattle, right? That was what a brand was. And it was a way to differentiate the quality of cattle from farm to farm. And it was originally, a brand was a way to cleanly and efficiently differentiate quality. And I think that in an era of Amazon where we have direct, factories from China selling directly on Amazon, which can be kind of fly-by-night operators. I'm not sure if that seller's going to be here tomorrow. Where am I going to get my replacement from? To have brands like Samsonite, Tumi, that have been around for such a long time and have so much credibility in the minds of customers, that really counts for something. When you're scrolling through Amazon, you're just seeing, a wash of no-name commodity products that all use the same stock photography, right? Once you see a brand that you recognize that is known for quality, then that tells you something.
Yeah, and I think it's a fun thing to think about. Like I'm talking to you right now from my home office, and I'm looking around my desk. There's some things on my desk that I would buy a cheap no-name brand, right? Like not everything I own online. And I think this is really becoming more of the uniform of the modern consumer. There are some things that you want to invest that really matter to you, right? So, on my desk, I have a water glass some hand sanitizer, some wireless headphones, chances are I'm not going to really worry about buying a ultra premium crystal water glass. You know what I mean? There might be a time and a place, but that's not something that I'm going to go on there. I'm going to buy, a larger glass that's well reviewed, et cetera. But if you think about some of this other stuff, like discount hand sanitizer, like what's this stuff made of? Like wireless headphones, those are like imperative to my day-to-day business. And to me, the thing you have to think about, it's something that all of us as consumers can relate with. For your backpack or piece of luggage, a default, like a broken zipper or a tear or a broken wheel, that's not going to happen to you when you're sitting at home, right? Like you're going to be, and we all know this is true, you're going to be rushing through JFK to catch a flight, or you are going to be, in a rainstorm in New York City or whatever it may be. Quality in this stuff really matters. And I think that that's something that as brands, it gives us an opportunity to kind of earn a level of trust that a commodity brand never will, because I think it's one of those things, it only takes one, right? And I'm reminded of sort of how viral this stuff is. I don't know if you ever watched sports, but in college basketball this year, like the most famous player in all of college basketball was wearing Nike shoes. And he literally hurt himself because he blew through his shoe. His sole came off in the middle of a game.
Yes, I remember seeing the news. Yeah.
That is a panic moment for a brand because, again, it only takes once, and that could have ended his career. That could have been millions and millions of dollars. So I think as brands, we always have to think about moments like that and minimize them as much as humanly possible. Look, I mean, no one's going to never have a defect rate. I don't think anyone's saying Nike makes a bad shoe now, but it presents an opportunity for the aforementioned after-sales service to really kind of differentiate. And when the guy came back, his name's Zion Williamson, when he came back with like a custom shoe still made by Nike, it was sort of an affirmation by him that the brand had supported him in a proper way. So you want to prevent those moments, and and as a commoditized brand, I don't know if I personally would ever trust a commoditized brand for my travel, just as I probably wouldn't for things that are really important to my business on a day-to-day basis, like wireless headphones.
Great. Now, what about Amazon private label? Does that keep you up at night, or does that fall into the same category as commoditized brands that you are not concerned about?
I'd say commoditized brands, but there's one thing about Amazon's private label that I find extremely interesting, which is their policy for warranty repair is like they just want to send you a new one. I actually think there's something really wrong with that in the context of sustainability. I get the idea of convenience, but that means you could have the same person that's treating a piece of luggage like a consumable, and that's really damaging, right? And I'll tell you a funny story. It's actually admitting a huge personal mistake / failure. When I first got to Tumi, I thought it would be really cool if we offered if somebody came in with like a warranty repair and the bag was like 13 years old, it was still under our lifetime warranty program, if we offered them some massive discount to get them into something new.
Okay.
Right. And honestly, in my head, I was giving the customers a service. I was positive people were going to love this. And we're talking discounts of like 80, 85%. Like it wasn't like an immaterial, like 10% off. And honestly, people were not thrilled because
they wanted you to fix it.
Yeah, they had a relationship with this thing. And so that made me realize two things. Like, number one, talk about a brand, right? Like when you love something so much that you don't want something new, you want this item, you want this thing back. And number two, warranty repair actually has a huge value add to our environment and kind of our overall world. So I think Amazon Basics is going to be in the mass price point. I think they'll do fine. I think they'll sell to a bunch of people. I just really worry about the overall effect, not only just on the business world, but just kind of making things more and more consumable, which is the last thing our world really needs now. That's a little preachy, but I think you get my point.
Got it. Okay, just one more question here. I've got two questions I really want to ask you. Okay, one, from an organizational perspective, where does Amazon fit within Samsonite?
It's sort of a hybrid, to be honest, because it has sort of a wholesale sales team, but also it functions in our organization as well. It's a little different by region, but if I'm being, and I'm not trying to avoid your question, it's sort of a hybrid where it's in sort of the traditional wholesale sales world, but also the digital team manages it as well.
Got it. And so the reason why I ask is back to something I mentioned at the start is Amazon touches everything. It's kind of a previous guest made a really good allegory, which is Amazon is a microcosm of an entire organization. There's finance, there's product, there's brand, there's customer service, there's fulfillment. So
yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know, because I think that is generally a signal that as an organization, you're really embracing it holistically. It's not just, put on the desk of the CMO and you deal with it.
To me, it's probably some place that I've changed opinions over the 3.5 years of working them within the TUMI Samsonite infrastructure. I remember at first, and this is obviously a very self-serving thought, saying like, oh, the digital team should for sure manage this, right? And the reality is AMS, AMG, sure, right? Like that's a digital marketer's job. That's what they're good at. They're good at optimizing keywords and they're good at optimizing bid practices and all that sort of stuff. But the process of selling goods into Amazon, in some ways it becomes automated, but there's still a real value for the folks that have been selling into wholesalers for 20, 30 years. And I think that that's something I did not appreciate on day one that I really appreciate now, which is why I've really kind of grown to love the hybrid approach we use.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show to share your insight and your journey. I think that there's a lot of people who are early in their e-commerce career listening to the show, as well as some very established folks. So I'm sure that they appreciate the story of your career arc. And if you are a data nerd, there is hope for you in marketing. So that's a nice story. If people want to connect with you on LinkedIn, are they able to find you there and send a connection request?
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing I always tell people that you're welcome to reach out. You're also welcome to mention the podcast so I kind of know where I heard from you. And then also, obviously we always get a lot of sales inquiries from LinkedIn. Send those along too. Just be upfront about it. If that's what you want, you may not like the answer, but at the same time, I promise you they'll get read. It's something I really pride myself on. But yeah, feel free to reach out.
Great. Yeah, that's good advice. There's nothing worse than people who you get a connection request from and then it's like, hey, Kiri, tell me about your biggest business challenge right now.
No, I think my personal favorite is, hey, I was hoping to get your opinion on our product, and I have a new really good canned response for that one. It's just like, yeah, sorry, I don't do free consulting. And then they usually respond back with, oh, but I actually wanted to sell you something. And you're kind of just like, no, I didn't get that. I didn't see that coming. So yeah, just be upfront. I think everybody's life will be better if we're all just a little more honest.
Some good advice. Well, thank you again, Charlie, and I'll catch you later.
Likewise, I appreciate it.